A mother writes to me and says, my son Adrian is 10 years old. He's very anxious all day, every day, worries about everything, and it's getting worse. Now he worries to the point that he throws up before he goes to school, and sometimes at school, and sometimes before things that he has to attend, because his worrying just gets to the point where his body responds in that way. He spends half his time with me, and I must admit, I'm a pretty anxious person myself, so I know I'm not helping things. I take medication for anxiety, and when Adrian gets anxious, I try not to show it, but I know that he can feel my fears too. Every other week he spends with his father, we're divorced, and his father is angry all the time about pretty much everything. So let's summarize what you've said so far. What a child needs most in all the world is to feel unconditionally loved, which enables him to feel worthwhile, safe, and even fearless. You are occupied by your own anxiety and fear, which makes you incapable, no blaming here, but you can't love him unconditionally. And his father is angry all the time, which makes him incapable too. The bottom line is that this 10-year-old child has spent 10 years of his life, all of his life, starving to death in a prison where no love is served. None. That seems like a harsh picture, but it's true. This kid is starving to death, and he's demonstrating that more every day with his anxiety, and now to the point that even his body is screaming rebellion by throwing up. Now, to everybody else who's listening, this is not good. This child's future is bleak. It gets worse and worse. I recommended to mom that she do the ridiculously effective parenting training, and she began the training. As she was beginning, she wrote me and said, "Oh my goodness, I have caused my son a lot more harm than I knew." Haven't we all? So I'm talking to some other people who are learning to parent their children, and I'm beginning to see how this is going to make a difference in me being anxious all the time. This isn't just going to help him, it's going to help me. Being loved feels pretty good. And these people that she's talking about are parents who are involved in the ridiculously effective parenting training. Way to go, kid. I mean, keep going. This takes time and commitment and practice, but you can find real love. You can feel it. You can remember it. And then, only then, you can begin to share it with Adrian. Until you feel it, he doesn't stand a chance. Mom writes again, I got a question. In the meantime, while I'm learning to be less anxious around Adrian, he still has to spend half his time with his father, who is angry at Adrian and at other people all day, every minute of the day. What can I do about that? Your question, no criticism, is like asking, quote, I just have a small brain tumor. Could you send me a YouTube video that would tell me how to take it out myself? It's an impossible question, how you can influence your father, or influence Adrian's father. You have to work on your own anxiety and on learning how to love Adrian unconditionally first. A lot. Focus on that. But no, you don't have to stand idly by while your son is traumatized every day by his father's anger. Most parents just feel utterly helpless at the onslaught of some behavior of their ex-spouse. First, you could try talking to his father and suggest that Adrian's anxiety is getting worse, and you have found a way that you think will be effective in helping him. In other words, the ridiculously effective parenting training, and you describe it to him. But don't expect him to leap on board the train and change the direction of his life. Angry people don't just suddenly give that up. He likely won't. If he does, and I've seen some parents do that, just to benefit their child, they'll change who they are or change the way they respond to pain. If he does, great. But if not, let's talk about another option that you can be in control of. You need to tell Adrian that in your home, there will be a zero tolerance for anger or anything unloving, which covers everything else. Tell Adrian what you're learning in the Ridiculously Effective Parenting Training, and even have Adrian watch it with you. Helps children enormously to see the training. They will refer to it. They will call you to account for the principles that you're learning, and that's actually a really good thing. One of the elements of the training declares that a happy family has a zero tolerance for anger. It's unloving and hurtful. And so you get to tell Adrian, as you're seeing that principle in the training, that he does not have to put up with his father's anger anymore. Many people at this point would be thinking, you got to be kidding me. A 10-year-old's going to say this to his dad? Yeah. If he sees it on the video, he sees me telling him that, and then you tell him how to do it. Now, he still has to be obedient with his dad. He has to be respectful. But from now on, no anger. I promise you that some people would find this horrible, to tell a child that his father can't be angry at him anymore. But are you kidding? Would you let a stranger beat up on your child physically every day, hit him in the face with his fists? No, you wouldn't. And nobody would object to your not allowing that to happen. Would you allow your husband to physically punch him in the face? No. In fact, you'd bring in the courts and you'd get full custody of Adrian. Now listen to this part. Your husband's anger is just as harmful as if he were physically hitting his boy. Some say that emotional pain, in fact, is worse than being physically hit. I happen to agree. So how can you just let this happen? How can you let your husband emotionally assault, punch in the face your son every day? You can't, and you get to do something about it. In fact, you really need to. You already know that Adrian hates his father's anger, so let's do something about it. Role play this with Adrian. So you ask him, quote, give me an example of something your dad did when you were with him last where he was angry at you. Since his father's angry 24/7, that should be pretty easy. And then ask Adrian, do you like it when your dad is angry at you? Well, clearly he's going to say no, or at least shake his head. So you say, so let's come up with what you could do about it. We're going to do something about it. There's going to be zero tolerance. What could you say to your dad when he gets angry? You're asking this to Adrian. Well, we already know the answer to that. He's not going to know the answer. So you'll have to give him some things that he could say. This will be scary in the beginning for Adrian to do on his own. This is why you're role-playing it, so he can practice saying these things initially to you, and then a little bit you can pretend to be angry while he says them, so that he gets better and better prepared to say them, and he's got you behind him. Well, like what? What could he say to his father, for example? I'm just going to give you a handful of examples. The examples could go on and on. He could say to his father, when his father says something unkind and irritable, Dad, I don't like it when you're angry at me. Now, that just happens to be my favorite because it's very clear. He's not saying, Dad, you're a bad person. You're horrible. You need to go to the hot place when you get angry at me. Dad, there's going to be a zero tolerance. No. I don't like it when you're angry at me. That can bring an adult up short pretty quick. And if his father says something, he can repeat it. Dad, I still don't like it. Or he can say, Dad, I get scared when you talk angrily to me. Or, Dad, I'm just a kid. I'm just 10. When you get angry, I get scared. See how clear and simple and short that is? You're my father, I'm 10, and you terrify me. Well, that's pretty clear. And I've discovered that most parents stop, at least in the short term. He could even say, now this one's going to be harder, but if his dad keeps doing it, he can even say this: Dad, when you're angry, I will not talk to you. He gets to do that. And yes, I'm aware of the risk of that. So the mom said to me, boy, that all makes more sense to me than anything I've ever heard, especially since I have the parenting training to help me. I do have a concern, a really big one. I'm afraid that if Adrian says one of these things to his father will get even more angry. My response? I don't care. His father's already angry. It's going to hardly be Adrian's fault. More angry, less angry, who cares? Anger is anger. You have to try at the very least. So Adrian needs to practice speaking up. And if his father gets angrier, Adrian just repeats himself. He doesn't explain it, he repeats it. And he's going to practice this with you when you role play over and over if necessary. His father has never heard Adrian speak like this, so it will at the very least shock him, stun him, often stun him to silence. Most of the time it actually works. Now, mom asks a very valid question. So what happens if Adrian says this and his father explodes and hits him? My answer is a little surprising to some. Actually, that would be excellent. Two things to consider. One, if you want things to change, there is always risk. You don't get change without risk. Everybody wants the risk-free, easy, eat a Three Musketeers bar change in life. Well, good luck. There are almost always some negative repercussions to change. Easy change doesn't exist. And this is with the good changes. You build a dam, for example, to build electricity to a distant community that doesn't have internet, phones, light, air conditioning, all the advantages of electricity. And even though that sounds like such a good thing, I mean, you're changing 10,000 people's lives, inevitably, you're going to change the habitat for a few animals. Some snail darter or whatever will have to find a new environmental niche. You treat somebody who's dying from COVID-19. Well, who could argue with that as a good thing? But as you do that, you get an increased risk of infection to the caregivers and consumption of significant resources that could have been used for the benefit of other patients who might actually be needier. All I'm saying is there's always a risk to doing good. That's the first thing. Because remember, we were talking about the possibility of dad hitting the son. Second, if he does hit your son, now you can just bring clear action against the dad. Now you call the police. You don't play around. But we're not going to have any more anger traumatizing this child who's becoming more anxious to the point of being disabled. And dad's already bringing nothing positive to the child emotionally. And you may be able to get sole custody and the ability to love and teach him in exactly the way he needs. In other words, you got no loss. We have children who are sick and dying emotionally. We cannot afford the luxury of doing nothing. We can't live in fear that somebody might be offended. Oh, heaven forbid. While a child's dying? Or we might look stupid. Or we might have to learn something new. Or somebody might get mad. No, lives are at stake. Adrian's is. He's worth you making whatever efforts you can make. He's worth you taking whatever risks are involved. Do you doubt that? You can do this.